Before you drift to sleep, comment down below where you're watching from. Let's dive into tonight's chilling stories. It had been a long day, and the last delivery on my route should have been simple. It was just another suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, with its neat rows of houses and manicured lawns. The address was one I hadn't been to before, but I wasn't worried. It was the kind of place you'd expect to find families with kids, maybe even a couple of pets. The streets were quiet, and the air had that calm, late evening feel, almost too calm. As I pulled into the cul-de-sac, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house I was delivering to stood at the end of the street, and even though it was a well-kept two-story, something about it made my stomach tighten. The porch light flickered as I got out of the truck, but that wasn't unusual. After all, things break. I rang the doorbell, hearing the faint sound echo through the still air. The door creaked open, revealing a man who looked to be in his late 40s. He was dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, but his eyes darted around the yard nervously, as though checking for something or someone. "Package for Mr. Hayes?" I said, holding up the box. His smile was quick, too quick. He stepped forward, but I instinctively took a step back. Something about him seemed off. He reached out to take the package, but paused just before grabbing it. Is there someone inside?" I asked, trying to break the tension that hung between us. He hesitated for a moment. Just my wife," he said, his voice shaky. "She's not feeling well, thank you." I didn't buy it. His face flushed a shade of red that was too quick for someone who was just talking about an ill spouse. I handed him the package, still watching his every movement. He closed the door behind him, not taking his eyes off me, but he was moving too quickly. Almost like he wanted to get the door shut and be done with it. I turned around, shaking the strange feeling in my gut, and began walking back to my truck. But just as I reached the edge of the driveway, I heard it. A loud crash, followed by a muffled scream. My heart stopped for a moment. I glanced back toward the house. The door was still closed, but my stomach churned. Was it the wife? Or was there someone else in there? I took a step forward, feeling a surge of unease rush through me, but before I could make up my mind, I saw the man again. He was at the window now, peeking through the blinds, his eyes wide with an intensity that sent chills crawling up my spine. I quickly turned back to the truck, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my keys. I didn't want to stay there for another second. The strange feeling had grown into a full-blown sense of dread. I slammed the truck door shut and started the engine, the rumble of the truck the only sound as I backed out of the driveway. I kept my eyes on the house in the rearview mirror until it was out of sight. But even as I drove away, that scream echoed in my mind. Back at the delivery center, I tried to forget about what had happened, but something didn't sit right with me. I had already moved on to the next order when I mentioned it to one of the other drivers. "You know, there's no record of any recent deliveries to that address," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "That house, it's listed as unoccupied, no forwarding address." My heart sank. If that house was empty, who had I just handed that package to? The next morning, I checked the delivery route again, hoping maybe that I had just made a mistake. But the address was there, printed clearly on my paperwork. Except it wasn't on the map. The house I had delivered to wasn't even listed. It was a Friday night in a quiet part of Columbus, Ohio, and I had just finished my shift at the diner. After a long week of barely getting a few hours of sleep, all I wanted was a quiet night in with some greasy food and a Netflix binge. So I decided to treat myself to a pizza. I didn't usually order out much, but tonight felt like one of those nights. The pizza place was a local joint, nothing fancy. They always had the best pies, and it wasn't too far from where I lived, so delivery was quick. I grabbed my phone, placed the order, and waited, eager for the comfort of melted cheese and crispy crust. The time was around 11:45 p.m. About 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting a delivery so soon, but I figured it was the pizza. I rushed to the door, tossing my blanket aside, and opened it without checking through the peephole. To my surprise, it wasn't the usual delivery guy. The man standing on my porch looked maybe a few years older than me, probably in his late 20s. He had a scruffy beard, a gray hoodie, and jeans that looked a little too big for him. He wasn't carrying a pizza box, just a brown paper bag, which seemed odd for a pizza delivery. Pizza?" I asked, confused. He didn't answer at first. His gaze flickered past me, eyes darting around the street behind me like he was scanning the area for something. It wasn't normal behavior, and I felt my skin prickle with unease. His eyes met mine again, but there was a weird intensity in them. He didn't seem like he was just delivering food. He seemed out of place. I got your order," he said finally, a voice a little too calm, almost too rehearsed. "But can you take it? It's for you." I frowned, feeling a lump form in my throat. I hadn't ordered anything that needed a paper bag. I didn't want to seem rude, but the situation felt off. I wasn't sure why, but I knew something wasn't right. "Are you sure you have the right address?" I asked, reaching for the bag without taking it from him. He didn't let go. Instead, he stared at me for a long moment, almost as though he was waiting for me to say something. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, I let go of the bag and he handed it to me. "Thanks," I muttered, then started to close the door. That's when he said it. "You're not going to open it?" he asked, his voice low and almost teasing. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why would I open it? I barely knew this guy, and he was acting stranger by the second. I forced a nervous laugh, but it didn't feel genuine, even to me. "I'll open it inside," I said quickly, shutting the door behind me before he could say another word. Once inside, I locked the door behind me, my heart thumping a little faster than usual. I placed the bag on the kitchen counter, trying to shake off the weird vibe I was getting. But it didn't go away. In fact, it grew stronger. I peeled back the top of the bag, expecting to find my pizza. But instead, there was something else. A note, folded in half, with a hastily scrawled message on it. I unfolded the paper carefully, feeling a chill creep up my spine as I read the words. "I'm closer than you think." My stomach dropped. My immediate thought was that this had to be some kind of joke, maybe a prank from the delivery guy or one of his friends, but as I looked around the room, something told me it wasn't. I went to the window and peered out through the blinds. The street outside was dark, but I didn't see anyone lingering. Still, my paranoia was running high. The message stuck with me. I closed the blinds and turned back to the counter, but that's when I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like nails against wood, coming from the back door. I froze, heart pounding. The back door was unlocked, but I had never heard that sound before. Cautiously, I crept toward the back of the house, trying to silence the hammering of my heartbeat. I reached the door and held my breath, listening. The scratching continued, faint but distinct. I slowly turned the handle and swung the door open, expecting to find some stray animal or maybe just a branch brushing against the window. But nothing was there. Still, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. It grew. I locked the door again, this time double-checking the deadbolt. I turned off all the lights, grabbed my phone, and called the pizza place. "Hello, this is Giuseppe's Pizza. How can I help you?" "Yeah, I just had a delivery and—" I started, my voice shaky. "The guy who came to my door, I don't think he was supposed to be the one delivering, and he gave me this weird note with my food. Can you check who delivered it?" There was a long pause on the line. Then the woman at the other end said, "I'm sorry, but all of our drivers are accounted for tonight. No one by that description was scheduled to be out on delivery." A cold chill ran down my spine. My hands were trembling as I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. And the next morning, when I checked my front door, there was nothing out of the ordinary. No signs of anyone lingering, no clues that the night before had even happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had dropped off that pizza wasn't just delivering food. He was delivering a warning. It was around midnight when I received the delivery notification on my phone. I wasn't expecting anything, and honestly, I wasn't in the mood to be disturbed. But I had been too caught up in finishing a project for work, so I didn't think much of it. I checked the app. An order had been made to my address from a local takeout place I had never heard of before. The item listed wasn't anything I'd ever ordered either. I stared at the notification for a moment, trying to figure out who would have placed an order in my name. I hadn't ordered anything, let alone from a restaurant I didn't even recognize. Confused, I decided to call the restaurant. "Hello, this is Tasty Bites. How can I help you?" "Hi, I just received a delivery notification, but I didn't place an order," I said, trying to sound calm. "Can you tell me what this is about?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before the voice on the other side responded. Let me check. You didn't order anything?" the person asked. "No, I didn't. I don't know who would have." "Well," the voice interrupted, "we've already dispatched the order, so it's on its way, but it's strange. We didn't get a name attached to it, just the address." I frowned, a sense of unease creeping in. How can you not have a name for an order? This seems off. The voice hesitated before saying, "We've had a couple of these tonight. Unnamed orders going to random addresses. Let me cancel it for you, okay?" But it was too late. The doorbell rang. I glanced nervously at the clock. It was 12:20 a.m. The delivery was right on time. I opened the door, half expecting to see a delivery driver, but what stood before me was not a delivery man. It was a woman, mid-30s, dressed in a plain black hoodie and jeans. Her face was partially obscured by a long, messy ponytail, but I could still make out her sharp features. She didn't smile or greet me. Instead, she simply held out a brown paper bag. I took the bag hesitantly, but she didn't let go. She kept her hand outstretched for a second, as if waiting for something. Thank you," I said, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. "You didn't order this," she said flatly, her eyes narrowing, "but someone did." Before I could respond, she pulled her hand back and turned to leave without saying another word. I stood there for a moment, dumbfounded, before closing the door behind me. I set the bag down on the counter and looked at the label. There was no name, just the address. Mine. But the receipt was blank. The entire order was a mystery. The bag felt oddly heavy for a takeout meal, and I started to feel more and more unsettled. I had the urge to open it, but something told me not to. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with this delivery. After a few minutes, my curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the bag. Inside there was a single item wrapped in foil. I pulled it out carefully, expecting something simple, like a sandwich or a snack. But what I found was a small, unmarked box. It was about the size of a shoebox, wrapped tightly in brown paper. There was no label, no indication of what it might be. The box felt cold, and I didn't remember it being cold when I picked it up from the porch. My hands were shaking now. Something about this didn't sit right with me. I walked over to the kitchen table and set it down. I stood there for a moment, just staring at the box, trying to figure out what to do next. Should I open it? Should I call the police? But then the realization hit me. This wasn't just some weird delivery mistake. It was deliberate. Someone had sent this to me. But why? Who? Before I could reach for my phone, the doorbell rang again. This time I didn't answer. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stood frozen in place. The knocking continued, followed by a low voice. "I know you're in there. I saw you open it." I couldn't breathe. The voice was muffled, but I could tell it wasn't the same delivery woman from before. The knocking stopped, but the voice lingered. "Don't open it," the voice continued, softer this time. "You don't know what's inside." I didn't move. I didn't even dare to breathe. The voice was silent for a long while, and when I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the blinds, there was no one in sight. No one standing outside, no shadow lingering in the corner of my porch. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep this box in my house, but I didn't want to open it either. Instead, I shoved it into a closet, locked the door, and went to bed with every light on, too afraid to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. No one had come back, and there was no sign of the strange delivery. I tried to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream, but when I went to the closet to get something, I couldn't ignore the fact that the box was still there. It hadn't moved. I never opened it. And the next night, I moved out of that apartment and I never looked back. But I've never been able to forget the sound of that voice, warning me to stay away. And I've never been able to stop wondering what was in that box. If you enjoyed these stories, drop a like and let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Stay safe out there and keep your curiosity in check.